The quiet of the neighborhood should have been comforting. Christmas decorations still glowed faintly in the windows. Wreaths hung on front doors, and the remnants of holiday joy lingered in the cold December air. But on the morning of December 26th, that calm was shattered by gunfire outside a family home in Freeport Township, Pennsylvania. A scene that would quickly spiral into one of the most disturbing true crime stories of the season. Just hours after Christmas celebrations had ended, first responders were dispatched to reports of a shooting. When they arrived, they found a husband and wife critically wounded outside their home. Neighbors stood frozen in disbelief as police secured the area, their flashing lights reflecting off snow-covered lawns. Inside the house, younger children were still present, alive, unharmed, and unaware that their lives had just changed forever. The mother would later succumb to her injuries. The father survived, but the damage, physical and emotional, was irreversible. Within minutes, investigators identified a shocking suspect, the couple's 18-year-old son. According to early reports, the teenager fled the scene on foot immediately after the shooting, triggering an intense multi-state manhunt. 9 units, helicopters, and state police poured into the area as authorities warned the public to remain vigilant. What made the case even more chilling was the timing. This wasn't a crime born out of chaos or darkness. It happened in broad daylight, the day after Christmas, when families across the country were still gathered together. As news spread, questions flooded social media and national headlines. What could drive a teenager to allegedly turn a weapon on his own parents? Were there warning signs? And how did this violence unfold while younger siblings were still inside the home? For investigators, the first hours were critical. They pieced together surveillance footage, witness statements, and a timeline that painted a troubling picture. For the community, disbelief turned into fear. This was not a crime committed by a stranger. It was a family tragedy, unfolding in a place that should have been safest. By nightfall, the search expanded beyond Pennsylvania. Authorities believed the suspect was heading south, desperate to disappear. Every update heightened the tension, as the nation watched a story that felt almost impossible to comprehend. This was no longer just a local crime story. It had become a chilling reminder of how quickly holiday joy can turn into unimaginable loss, and how the most devastating violence can come from within the home. As daylight faded on December 26th, the investigation shifted from a crime scene to a race against time. With the suspect gone and believed to be armed, Pennsylvania State Police issued an urgent alert. Roadways were monitored, license plate readers activated, and surrounding counties were warned to stay vigilant. What had begun as a family tragedy was now a full-scale manhunt, one that would stretch far beyond the quiet neighborhood where the shooting occurred. Investigators worked quickly to reconstruct the suspect's movements. Surveillance cameras from nearby businesses captured fleeting images. A hooded figure moving with purpose, cutting across side streets, avoiding main roads. Witnesses reported seeing someone matching the teen's description slipping through wooded areas, then disappearing. Each tip added a piece to the puzzle, but none delivered the certainty police needed. Inside the home, detectives continued gathering evidence. The younger siblings were located safely and placed with relatives as child services stepped in. Officers documented shell casings, traced the firearm allegedly used, and began the painstaking process of interviewing neighbors. Anyone who might have heard an argument, noticed unusual behavior, or seen the suspect before the shots were fired. The answers, at least for now, were frustratingly incomplete. As night fell, authorities expanded the search. Intelligence suggested the teen might be attempting to leave the state, possibly seeking help from acquaintances or relatives. Alerts were sent to neighboring jurisdictions, and state police coordinated with federal partners to widen the net. Helicopters swept over rural areas while 9 units tracked scent trails that faded near major roadways. By early morning, a break came from hundreds of miles away. Law enforcement in West Virginia received a tip about a suspicious individual matching the suspect's description. Officers moved carefully, aware that desperation can make a person unpredictable. The arrest, when it came, was swift and without incident. The teen was taken into custody, bringing the manhunt to a close less than 48 hours after it began. For investigators, the capture was only the beginning. Extradition proceedings followed, and prosecutors prepared a list of charges that reflected the gravity of the allegations. For the public, the arrest offered a momentary sense of relief, but it also raised new questions. Why flee? What had happened in the hours before the shooting? And what would the surviving father say once he was able to speak? As the suspect was transported back to Pennsylvania, cameras lined the courthouse steps. The story had now crossed from breaking news into something deeper and darker. A case that demanded answers, not just headlines. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the notification bell. With the suspect in custody, investigators turned their focus inward, away from the manhunt and toward the family dynamics that may have led to the violence. What they began to uncover was not a single explosive moment, but a series of tensions that, according to prosecutors, had been quietly building long before Christmas Day. Friends and neighbors described the family as largely private. From the outside, there were no obvious red flags. No frequent police visits, no public disturbances, no visible signs of chaos. Holiday decorations still lined the property. To many, they looked like a typical American family navigating the stresses of daily life. But behind closed doors, investigators believe a very different story may have been unfolding. Court documents revealed that the 18-year-old suspect had been struggling in the months leading up to the shooting. Sources familiar with the investigation said there were reports of ongoing conflict between the teen and his parents, centered around discipline, independence, and future plans. Arguments had reportedly become more frequent, more intense, and more personal. Prosecutors allege that the days before Christmas were particularly strained. Family members had gathered, expectations were high, and unresolved issues were pushed to the surface. Investigators carefully reconstructed the timeline of Christmas Day: who was home, who spoke to whom, and what was said. While no single argument has been publicly identified as the trigger, authorities believe emotions reached a breaking point. The presence of younger siblings added another layer of complexity. Detectives emphasized that the children were inside the home during the shooting, though not physically harmed. Child advocacy experts later noted that such cases often involve unseen emotional trauma, experiences that can shape a child's life long after the headlines fade. As the surviving father began to recover in the hospital, investigators waited for the moment he could safely be interviewed. His account would be crucial, not only to understanding what happened that morning, but also to establishing intent and sequence. Prosecutors hoped his testimony could clarify whether the attack was spontaneous or planned. Meanwhile, the suspect remained largely silent, communicating through legal counsel. His lack of public statements fueled speculation online, but authorities cautioned against jumping to conclusions. They stressed that motive in family violence cases is often layered and complex, shaped by long-term stress rather than a single cause. For the community, the revelations were unsettling. This was not a random act of violence. It was a deeply personal crime, one rooted in family relationships, trust, and proximity. It forced neighbors and viewers alike to confront a difficult reality. Sometimes the most dangerous conflicts are the ones no one else can see. When the accused was finally brought back to Pennsylvania, the case entered its most consequential phase. The courtroom became the new stage, one where every word mattered, every detail was scrutinized, and the story would be tested against the strict standards of the law. Prosecutors wasted little time outlining the seriousness of the charges. The teen faced homicide, attempted homicide, and multiple weapons-related counts. In their opening filings, the state framed the case as a deliberate act of violence following escalating family conflict. They emphasized the timing, just one day after Christmas, and the vulnerability of the victims, arguing that the alleged attack shattered not only a family but the sense of safety within an entire community. Central to the prosecution's case was the timeline. They pointed to evidence gathered at the scene, witness statements, and the suspect's flight across state lines as indicators of consciousness of guilt. According to prosecutors, leaving the state was not panic. It was an attempt to evade responsibility. The defense, however, immediately pushed back. Defense attorneys urged the court and the public to remember that an arrest is not a conviction. They challenged the interpretation of the evidence, suggesting that the prosecution was building its case on assumptions rather than indisputable facts. The defense argued that family conflict, while tragic, does not automatically equate to premeditated violence. They also raised questions about the investigation itself. Were all leads properly followed? Was the crime scene preserved without error? And could emotional trauma and shock have influenced early witness statements? As pretrial hearings unfolded, the judge issued strict warnings about media coverage, reminding all parties that the accused was entitled to a fair trial. Cameras captured brief glimpses of the teen entering and exiting the courthouse, head down, expression unreadable. Those images quickly circulated online, sparking heated debate. Some saw a remorseless suspect. Others saw a young person facing consequences beyond comprehension. Behind the scenes, the surviving father's condition remained a focal point. His eventual testimony could prove pivotal, offering first-hand insight into what happened that morning. Until then, both sides prepared, reviewing evidence, consulting experts, and anticipating how a jury might interpret the story. For the public, the courtroom proceedings were both sobering and frustrating. Answers would not come quickly. Legal processes moved carefully, deliberately, and often slowly, especially in cases involving family violence and serious charges. But one thing was clear: the case had moved beyond speculation. The narrative would now be shaped by sworn testimony, forensic analysis, and the burden of proof. And as the trial loomed, the stakes could not have been higher. As the legal process moved forward, the community began confronting a reality that no verdict could fully resolve. The mother's death left an irreplaceable void, one felt most deeply by the younger children who survived the night physically unharmed, but forever changed. Grief counselors were brought in. Schools adjusted routines. Neighbors organized vigils that blended mourning with disbelief. This was not a tragedy caused by a stranger passing through. It came from inside a home many had walked past for years. In court filings, prosecutors underscored the broader consequences of the alleged crime. They argued that family violence cases often expose gaps in prevention, missed warning signs, untreated conflicts, and the dangerous assumption that domestic disputes will resolve themselves. The state framed the case as a call to take threats and escalating tension seriously, especially when firearms are present in the household. The defense continued to emphasize restraint. They cautioned against allowing public emotion to prejudge the outcome and reminded observers that the justice system exists to separate outrage from evidence. As motions and hearings unfolded, both sides prepared for a trial that would scrutinize not only actions, but intent, mental state, and responsibility. For the surviving father, recovery was slow and painful. His path forward would involve more than physical healing. There were questions he might one day answer under oath, and losses he would carry for the rest of his life. For the children, the future would be shaped by therapy, stability, and a world suddenly defined by court dates and headlines. Nationally, the case reignited conversations about youth violence, parental relationships, and how quickly domestic conflicts can escalate into irreversible tragedy. True crime audiences followed closely, not just for the details of the case, but for what it represented. A stark reminder that violence does not always announce itself with warning signs the public can see. As the story settled into the long arc of the justice system, one truth became unavoidable. This was no longer just a breaking news headline or a holiday shocker. It was a human story about trust broken, lives altered, and the consequences that follow when a family's private struggles explode into public devastation. Whatever the final outcome in court, the legacy of this case will endure in quieter ways. In the lives reshaped by a single morning after Christmas, and in the lessons communities hope they never have to learn again.